The Rock faced racism and justice took a stand. It was a beautiful day at the park, where everything seemed peaceful, until prejudice and authority were abused. The tranquility was shattered as a sudden confrontation unfolded, capturing the attention of everyone present. A racist police officer, blinded by his bias, struck the Rock with a baton in an unjust show of power. But what followed was something no one could have predicted. In that moment, the officer learned the most profound lesson of his life, a lesson he would carry forever. What transpired to make a hero rise and defend justice in such a pivotal moment? What act of courage turned an instance of injustice into an unforgettable lesson for all? Follow along as we dive into this powerful story that touches the heart and inspires deeply. If you love meaningful, moving stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next incredible tale. And now the story begins. The park was alive with the sounds of a sunny afternoon. Birds chirped cheerfully, children laughed and played, and joggers moved rhythmically along the winding paths. Amid the bustling crowd, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson sat quietly on a stone bench. Dressed in a hoodie and sunglasses, he blended seamlessly into the simplicity of parkgoers seeking a moment of tranquility. Today, he wasn't a global star. He was just another person savoring a peaceful break after grueling workdays. Officer Cain, a man of imposing stature, strolled through the park with deliberate steps. His self-assured gait and piercing gaze left an air of unease in his wake. Known for his habitual discrimination, Cain viewed anyone who didn't fit his narrow standards as out of place. The badge on his chest seemed to feed his arrogance rather than serve as a symbol of justice. As Cain's sharp eyes scanned the crowd, they landed on the Rock, sitting alone on the bench. A flicker of prejudice ignited in Cain's mind. Toxic thoughts seeped into his consciousness, and his grip tightened around the baton on his belt. A low, angry murmur escaped his lips. What's a guy like him doing here, dressed like that? Cain's thoughts were crystal clear. Someone in a hoodie and sunglasses, sitting silently in the park, didn't meet his standards. In Cain's eyes, anyone not actively participating in some park activity was suspicious. With heavy, deliberate steps, Cain moved closer to the Rock, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots slicing through the serene atmosphere. As the distance closed, his domineering presence grew stronger. Without greeting or courtesy, he broke the peace with a sharp, commanding tone. "Hey you, what are you doing here? You can't just sit around." The interruption shattered the Rock's tranquil moment. Lifting his head, he looked up at Cain. Surprise flickered across his face but was quickly replaced by a restrained hint of irritation. Behind the sunglasses, his eyes glinted with sharpness, a quiet defiance. Slowly, he removed his glasses, his movements deliberate and steady, asserting his presence without a word. Their eyes met, and the Rock's gaze bore straight into Cain's, unflinching and firm. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but carried a weighty confidence, a quiet authority that didn't rely on theatrics. "I'm just sitting here, relaxing. I'm just enjoying the park." The Rock's words, though soft, rippled through the tense silence like a stone dropped into still water, sending waves of unease through the officer's overbearing demeanor. Officer Cain narrowed his eyes, the disdain etched on his face twisting it into a grotesque mask. His lips curled into a sneering smirk as he spat out, "People like you." The atmosphere grew heavier, the phrase landing like a slap in the face. Without pausing, Cain continued, his voice flat and laced with derision. "This park isn't a place for people like you to sit around all day. Move along." His tone cut like a knife, slicing into the pride of the man before him. Cain's eyes gleamed with challenge, his neck veins bulging as if he were daring any resistance. The Rock raised a single eyebrow, his expression tinged with curiosity but his piercing gaze never wavering from Cain. One corner of his mouth lifted ever so slightly, a subtle display of irritation, as he asked slowly and deliberately, each word carrying an undercurrent of challenge. "People like me? What exactly do you mean by that?" His voice was steady, every syllable emphasized, radiating a quiet but unmistakable displeasure. It wasn't a rhetorical question. It was a statement wrapped in defiance. Cain's grip on his baton tightened, his knuckles turning white, his entire body coiled like a spring, ready to snap at any moment. His voice dropped, low and simmering with anger. "Don't get smart with me." His tone was sharp as a blade, carrying a thinly veiled threat. Then, with a harsh growl, he barked, "I'm giving you a direct order. Stand up and leave now." To punctuate his demand, Cain swished his baton through the air in a warning gesture. Though small, the act radiated aggression, turning the situation even more volatile. Yet the rock remained unshaken, his gaze locked onto Cain's, unwavering and composed. His voice remained calm, unbothered, as if this was nothing more than a trivial inconvenience. "Officer, I'm not breaking any laws. I have every right to sit here." The firmness in his tone was undeniable, each word laden with an unyielding resolve. This wasn't mere defiance. It was a declaration of his right to be treated with dignity. Cain's fury ignited further, his face flushing crimson as the veins in his neck bulged grotesquely. The baton in his hand was no longer just a tool of law enforcement. It had become an extension of his seething anger. He hissed through gritted teeth, "Are you defying me?" His words were less a question and more an accusation, a challenge thrown down to escalate the standoff. The tension in the air reached a boiling point, as all eyes in the vicinity began to turn toward the unfolding drama. The need for dominance in Officer Cain, like a predator closing in on its prey, overpowered all reason. With a sudden, violent motion, he swung his baton with full force. The strike tore through the air with a chilling whistle before landing heavily on the rock's back. The brutal sound, reverberating like a thunderclap. The sheer audacity and cruelty of the act left those watching in stunned disbelief. The sharp crack of the blow shattered the serene afternoon, jolting bystanders out of their peaceful reverie. Shock and outrage spread across their faces as they scrambled to pull out their phones, trembling fingers recording the horrifying scene unfolding before them. Slowly, deliberately, the rock rose from the bench. His movements were unhurried but carried a quiet intensity, the embodiment of controlled fury. His imposing figure, broad shoulders and towering height, unfolded like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon, drawing every eye in the park. His expression transformed, shifting from calm composure to a simmering wrath that he kept tightly reined in. His dark eyes glinted with icy determination, his face set like chiseled stone, radiating unyielding resolve. The energy rippling through him was a testament to the legendary strength he wielded, now barely restrained. When he finally spoke, his words sliced through the tension like a blade. "You just made a big mistake." His voice, deep and resonant, carried the weight of an unspoken warning. It was no mere threat, it was a promise. Though he didn't shout, the power behind his tone made the hairs on the back of the neck stand on end. His hands clenched into fists, veins bulging, muscles taut as if preparing for whatever came next. Cain, who moments ago exuded dominance, now found himself face to face with an adversary who dwarfed him in every conceivable way, physically, morally, and mentally. Yet his arrogance clung to him like a vice. With a twisted smirk, he sneered, "Oh yeah? What are you gonna do, tough guy?" Cain's voice dripped with contempt and provocation. His confidence rested on the badge pinned to his chest and the baton in his hand, a naive and dangerous ignorance of the magnitude of his miscalculation. The rock didn't respond. His silence spoke louder than any words could. His unwavering gaze bored into Cain, unrelenting and unyielding. The stillness in his demeanor was the calm before the storm, a forewarning of what was to come. Taking a deliberate step forward, the rock entered Cain's space, closing the distance with an air of authority that was impossible to ignore. Every movement radiated power, his presence now towering and menacing, a harbinger of justice waiting to be served. His voice rang out, each word heavy with fury and contempt. "You think that badge gives you the right to hurt people without cause?" The words weren't just an accusation. They were a verdict, a condemnation of Officer Cain's abuse of power. The atmosphere thickened, the tension palpable, as if the entire park was bracing for an inevitable explosion. And then Cain moved again, his fury overriding any shred of reason. He swung his baton wildly, his motions erratic and unrestrained, a desperate attempt to reassert control. But his recklessness only exposed his vulnerability. The Rock, guided by the instincts of a seasoned fighter, reacted with lightning speed. His hand shot out, catching the baton mid-air in a decisive, precise motion that defied belief. The crowd gasped audibly as the sound of the baton clattering to the ground echoed across the park. The collective disbelief was almost tangible, their astonished faces frozen as they took in the scene. The Rock stood tall, unshaken, his towering form a stark contrast to Cain's crumbling composure. When he spoke, his voice was steady and commanding, carrying the weight of a final warning. "I'm giving you one chance. Don't let this go any further." Each word was a cold ultimatum, a declaration laced with unyielding resolve. His eyes, now ice-cold, locked onto Cain with an intensity that promised swift consequences if his warning was ignored. But Cain's hubris blinded him to the reality of the situation. With a growl of frustration, he charged at the Rock, his movements reckless like a wounded animal lashing out. Yet the man before him wasn't prey, he was a masterful predator, a hunter who knew every move before it was made. With calculated precision, the Rock sidestepped Cain's clumsy attack effortlessly, his movements fluid and deliberate. It was almost a dance, his body shifting gracefully as he evaded the strike. Then, with a perfectly executed sweep of his leg, the Rock caught Cain off balance, sending him sprawling face first into the damp grass still wet with morning dew. The reaction from the crowd was instant and thunderous. Cheers erupted like a tidal wave, their voices filling the air with unrestrained exhilaration. "That's what he deserves." The roar of approval drowned out the birdsong and the rustling leaves, an overwhelming surge of energy coursing through the park. The crowd's jubilation was electric, a celebration of justice served. They shouted their admiration for the Rock, their respect for him reaching an undeniable crescendo. The Rock remained motionless, his gaze locked onto Cain, who now lay sprawled on the ground, writhing with pain and humiliation. But the sting of shame didn't deter Cain. He scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with rage, the embarrassment only fueling the fire of his aggression. Before Cain could charge again, two other officers arrived, sprinting across the grass, their hurried footsteps breaking the tense silence. As they approached, the scene before them brought them to an abrupt halt. The Rock, tall and commanding, loomed over their defeated colleague. Disbelief was etched across their faces, their expressions frozen in a mixture of awe and confusion. One of them, his mouth slightly agape, muttered in shock, "Wait a second, is that Dwayne Johnson?" The second officer's voice trembled with astonishment, the question hanging in the air. His hands instinctively lowered from his weapon as his eyes fixed on the figure before him. The sheer presence of the Rock left him, and everyone else watching, momentarily stunned. Cain, still trembling with fury and grappling with his wounded pride, straightened up. His bewildered eyes darted between his colleagues and the Rock, as if desperately trying to piece together what he had missed. His confusion spilled into his voice, strained and hoarse. "Who the hell is he?" Cain's shout was laced with aggression, yet the undertone of bewilderment betrayed his uncertainty. His mind reeled, struggling to comprehend the extraordinary turn of events. The second officer, maintaining a composed demeanor, stepped forward. Each step carried an air of authority, but his presence was not hostile. When he spoke, his tone was professional, marked by deep respect as he addressed the Rock directly. "Mr. Johnson, are you all right? We had no idea you were here." His words reflected the sudden realization of standing before a living legend, the reverence in his voice underscoring the gravity of the moment. Every gesture radiated acknowledgement of who the Rock was, both as a public figure and a person of undeniable influence. Cain's confusion only deepened. His wide eyes stared at his colleague, then back at the Rock, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. His face contorted into an expression of pure astonishment as he stammered. "What? He's important?" The incredulous tone of Cain's voice trembled as he wrestled with the revelation unraveling before him, a truth that now hung in the air for all to witness. The second officer turned sharply toward Cain, his expression shifting into one of unrestrained fury. His fiery gaze bore into his colleague, his voice ringing out with forceful authority. "Stand down, Cain, now!" The command sliced through the tension like a whip, leaving no room for argument. The second officer's words carried the weight of indignation, both at Cain's behavior and the growing realization of how deeply his actions had crossed the line. He's not just important, he's one of the most respected figures in this country. A man who has captured the hearts and minds of millions. And you, in your boundless ignorance, dared to assault him. The officer's words cut through the air like the sharpest blade, each syllable laced with disdain. The weight of his rebuke pressed Cain into an invisible corner, leaving him visibly shaken. His once arrogant demeanor crumbled, reduced to fragments like a sandcastle struck by a relentless wave. I didn't know," Cain stammered, his voice trembling with fear and desperation. Each word was halting, his attempt at a defense feeble and hollow. He swallowed hard, his shaking hand hovering near his side, uncertain of what to do in the face of the storm he had unleashed. The Rock, unwavering and composed, stepped forward, his presence silencing Cain's futile mutterings. When he spoke, his voice was deep and steady, carrying the weight of unshakable authority. Every word landed with the impact of a gavel delivering a final verdict. "You didn't care to know. You judged me based on appearances, on the prejudices you carry, and used that as an excuse to treat me like a criminal. That says more about you than it ever will about me." His words resonated like a bell tolling in the tense silence, a sharp and undeniable wake-up call. His commanding tone and the quiet power in his stance demanded attention and respect from everyone present. The senior officer stepped forward, his movements deliberate, his gaze as cold and piercing as steel. His voice, calm but laced with authority, cut through the moment like a judge pronouncing a sentence. "Officer Cain, you are hereby placed under investigation for misconduct. Surrender your badge and weapon immediately." The clarity and finality of the order left no room for argument. Cain's face contorted in shock, horror spreading across his features as he struggled to process the directive. Around them, the crowd erupted in murmurs, their voices filled with approval as they watched Cain's downfall unfold. Cain opened his mouth to protest, grasping at straws to salvage his career. But the senior officer raised a hand, cutting him off with a sharp gesture of finality. "We have witnesses and video evidence. Your actions are unacceptable and will not be tolerated in this department. Badge and weapon, now." The officer's voice was firm, his blazing eyes leaving no doubt about the seriousness of his words. Cain, overwhelmed and cornered, had no choice but to comply. The defiance in him evaporated under the relentless weight of the reprimand. With shaking hands, he removed his badge and gun, his head hanging low in defeat. The crowd watched silently as Cain was escorted away by his colleagues, his humiliation palpable in every step he took. Whispers of approval and satisfaction rippled through the bystanders. A shared sense of justice served. The once dominant officer now left the park a broken man, swallowed by the consequences of his arrogance and prejudice. As Cain's figure disappeared into the distance, the park erupted in applause and cheers. The sound spread like a wave of joy, rippling through the crowd as if justice itself had been celebrated. In the midst of this spontaneous celebration, the Rock turned to face the crowd. His gaze was gentle, a mix of humility and gratitude evident in his expression. When he spoke, his voice carried strength and sincerity. "Thank you all for your support." His eyes scanned the faces before him, and his tone softened, carrying a message of empathy and unity. "This isn't about who I am." His words steadied, now filled with conviction and purpose. "This is about standing up to injustice, refusing to accept unfair treatment and discrimination in any form. No one, whether they're famous or not, deserves to be treated the way I was today." It's up to us, together, to demand fairness and hold those who abuse power accountable. The rock's words echoed through the park, a powerful call for solidarity and justice. The crowd fell silent as his message resonated deeply, then erupted into louder cheers. The roar of voices carried not just support but a shared determination to uphold the ideals he had spoken of. His simple, yet fervent speech ignited a spark in everyone, a flame of justice reflected in their eyes and smiles. As the rock moved through the crowd, his steps confident and purposeful, a young boy wove his way forward, clutching a notebook tightly against his chest. His eyes shone with youthful admiration, his face lit with pure adoration for his hero. "Mr. Johnson, can I get your autograph?" the boy asked, his voice trembling with a mix of nervousness and excitement. The rock stopped in his tracks, his gaze softening as he noticed the boy. A warm, genuine smile spread across his face, easing the tension in the air. He knelt down to the boy's level, his towering frame becoming approachable and kind. "Of course, buddy. What's your name?" he asked, his voice gentle and friendly, bridging the gap between a global icon and a starstruck child. That simple question, spoken with sincerity, erased any barriers between them. For that moment, there were no distinctions, just a heartfelt connection. The boy's eyes sparkled as he watched the rock carefully sign the notebook, creating a keepsake he would cherish forever. The strokes of the pen carried a weight of kindness that no fame could overshadow. As the rock handed the notebook back, the boy's mother stepped forward, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for what you did today." The rock looked up at her, his expression humble yet unwavering. His actions and words had turned a moment of injustice into a rallying cry for fairness and respect, and in doing so, he had left an indelible mark on everyone present. This story reminds us that, no matter the circumstances, justice and courage will always triumph over injustice and prejudice. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to stand up for what's right? Share your thoughts or experiences. In the comments, your story might inspire others to take a stand, too. If this story resonated with you or felt meaningful, don't forget to share it with your friends and loved ones to help spread the message of justice, respect, and kindness. Thank you for watching and supporting us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on more heartfelt and impactful stories. Wishing you happiness, health, and the strength to continue spreading positivity in your life. Thank you for supporting the channel. Like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories shared here are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared to promote the values of humanity and kindness and have been rewritten with the assistance of AI. If any inaccuracies are found, we kindly ask for your understanding. Wishing you all the best in life.